Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Power Law Investor. Today is the 10th of July, 2025, and Bitcoin is trading at $113,500, recently hitting an all-time high. And today we will be talking about Bitcoin. And the major things that I want you to take away from this video will be where Bitcoin's current price is in the power law, what is the anticipation for the price 6 months and a year in advance, how to interpret that data, and also what is our tactical GPS, the Power Amplitude Index for Bitcoin, telling us about this. So let's jump in. And at the end of it, you'll have a pretty good idea why I think the right strategy right now is to continue DCAing into Bitcoin, and the returns are going to be quite good for this upcoming year. So let's take a step back first and identify what is the power law and quickly get up to speed on that. If you plot the days since genesis of Bitcoin and take the log of that, and also plot the price on the y-axis and take the log of that, you end up with this blue line. And this blue line, when we run a regression through it, which is just a fancy way, a linear regression, which is just a fancy way of saying that it has a trend through it, we end up with this particular equation with a very strong R squared. This means that 96.5% of the variation in this blue line is explained by the red line over here, right? So the red line is the trend line. And if we then assume that this trend line, which has been holding for the last 15 years, is going to continue in the future, that is, the future is going to be like the past, then we can convert it into the linear domain, and we end up with a curve that looks like this, which is basically saying that this is the trajectory that we expect on average of the price of Bitcoin going forward. And again, here is the equation. Now we've converted into this curved from the log domain into the curve domain over here. And you can still see that it has a very good R squared fit. That's derived from the linear thing that we did back then. So what I want you to know is even though we have these peaks and valleys, we basically end up following this trend line. If we end up using this trend line, we can predict what the price is going to look 1 year from now. If it follows the trend and it stays on trend, we expect the price in a year's time, around the 10th of July 2026, to be about $170,000, which is about what, $50,000, $55,000 more than what we have right now at 113,000. All right. In 6 months, we should be about 143,000. And right now, this discounted trend is saying, hey, we're still below this trend line right now. Okay. So the power law, what I'd like you guys to take away from that is to understand that this thing has been going on for the last 15 years. There have been ups and downs, but this is the mathematically derived. It's not me drawing squiggly lines. It's the mathematically derived trend line for this. And if we think the future is going to be like the past, then it's a good way to anticipate what the future price will be. It's what I use in my own personal investing also for my Bitcoin to try and get an idea what I think the price will be a year or 6 months from now. Okay. So that's what the power law is telling us. In addition, for those who've been following the channel, I've developed a shorter term index called the Power Amplitude Index, which tells us what the value of Bitcoin is using a completely independent mechanism from this. So it tells us how risky it is compared to its own history and how Bitcoin is doing right now. Is it overvalued to its history or is it undervalued compared to its history? And that's over here. So the way this particular metric works, the Power Amplitude Index, it's a value generated from 0 to 1. 0 is when it's blue, the dark blue, and red when it is around 1, right? So what this is telling us, the redder it is, the more dangerous the price is, the more it's shot up relative to its own history. And the bluer it is, the cooler it is, so the better the time it is, and the more undervalued it is relative to its own history. So if we turn on, so the important thing to first realize is that it captures the lows in the cycle quite effectively. So you can see over here, it caught this particular low in 2023 when the price was around $25,000. It was indicating low values over here when we were about $20,000. It was also being considerably cooler and giving a risk metric of about 0.36 in March of this year when the price had dropped down to $82,000 and even went a little lower. So it does a pretty good job of this. In fact, let's zoom in a little bit and we can see that it's capturing the lows quite effectively. Now, this is not based on my changing the values based on what happens in the future. It is the real-time values that are based only on the history up to that point. So if we were at this point over here, this risk metric would be giving a value of 0.35, right? And that doesn't change with the future data that we've gotten in. So based on this, the current price, even though it is at an all-time high, we're looking at a value of about 0.44 on the Power Amplitude Index, all right? And what that's saying is if you look back upon the history of Bitcoin, it's not particularly hot right now. It hasn't gone to the orange zone. It is still in the yellow zone, which indicates that it is a reasonable time to actually buy. What we do want to think about is, yes, if it drops down to the blue, what sort of values might we get? And for that, we can look at this table over here. So if we look at the value of 0.36 or 0.4, that particular risk metric would indicate a value, if it happened today, of about $94,000, which means that, yes, at $113,000, based on its past history, the risk that you're taking is probably, at worst case, it goes down to about $94,000, maybe $90,000, right? Because when you're making an investment, of course, you want to look at the upside and the downside. So for me, what this suggests is that it's a good time to start DCAing in. But in case the price drops down, you might be able to get it at a better price in the near future because we really don't know what's going to happen in the short term. What we do know from the power law is where we are headed in the long term. And in the long term, the power law says that in a year's time, we should be about 170,000. So from two aspects, both the power law and the power amplitude index, it suggests that now is a good time to continue DCAing it. Now, let me take a step back and sort of tell you what I think is actually the price that this is likely going to hit in the next 6 to 12 months. And if we look at the power law, whether you look at it in the log domain or you look at the linear domain, you see that every 4 years we seem to get this peak, right? It's much more clearer on the in the linear title. So here, December 2017, November 2021, another 4 years, sorry, every 4 years. And in this year, towards the end of this year, quarter three 2025, Q1 2026, we expect the price to overshoot the trend line. Again, if the future is like the past. Even though the trend line is saying that we'd be at 170,000, that's saying if we touch the red line, right? If we go considerably higher than that, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect values of between 200, maybe even 250K, right? And so for that reason, it makes sense to continue to DCA in and continue the exposure to Bitcoin. My general tendency as someone who likes to buy things at a discount is try to buy them when they're particularly low, right? So if we have a big drop relative to the trend line over here, that would be a good time to buy as we had in April 2025 when we dropped down to about, let's just go on this one so it's clearer to see, we dropped down to about 76,000, right? So that's what we're getting from the power law. And from the power amplitude index, we're not in the blue zone as yet, right? Which means we could drop down. We've seen it historically happen in April. We've seen it happen in different parts in the cycle. So in order to guard against that, the best strategy is not to do a lump sum, but to use a DCA. I know it's very tempting when we see the market starting to rise that, oh my God, I'm going to miss the boat. That's the greed part of the fear and greed issue there, right? Or just every day buy a little bit of Bitcoin, whatever fits your particular financial profile. Again, this is not financial advice, but whatever works for you, this means that you continue to get exposure. And if the price goes down, you end up buying more Bitcoins with your fiat dollars, right? Uh, Again, I think that the price target of 150 to 200K by the end of this year, Q1 2026, is the most likely, in my opinion. I think even if we do get any downside currently in their fluctuations, I don't think we go below the zero point 0.4 risk level. So that's probably about 94,000 or so. So that's kind of where I see things going at. This is a short video. You can find this particular graph on my website, thepowerlawinvestor.com. I'll leave a link in the description below so you guys can check it out. So please sign up for the email list and you'll get notified when new information and new updates to the charts gets posted. So yes, drop a like and subscribe to the channel to support its going forward. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments and I'll try and get back to them as soon as I can. So thanks a lot for listening and see you on the next one. Cheers.